Hello, and welcome to another episode of Movie Mood. I'm your host, Alex Van Horn.
I'm John Alberta.
And today we're going to have a more freewheeling discussion about the movies that have impacted us. We could say these are the movies that have made us in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we want to do is just kind of talk about the things that really inspired us, whether that be to create or just enjoy movies more. And I'm looking forward to having the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many movies. Like I was making a list like through my life of movies that have impacted me, but I felt like for me, I would stick with the ones that have kind of impacted me in this time of my life and my age and maybe a little younger.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think at any point in your life, you've got like a movie that you love. Like probably in 1996, my favorite movie was Space Jam, but
Oh yeah.
which I mean,
Forgot about
don't get me
that.
wrong, I still love Space Jam. I might
It's
even talk about
fantastic.
it today, but yeah, it changes over time. So sticking
Yeah,
with the
you know.
sticking with the ones that kind of transcend and you just keep loving no matter what. So
Yeah, you know, when you're like 5, you love dinosaur movies. And then when you're 10, you know, you're like into Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And then, you know, you go from there.
yeah, right.
So, do you want to talk about your movie first or mine?
Let's talk about yours first.
Okay. I
Yeah,
do have yours fresh in my mind, but I also have mine. I watched them both last night. So they're both fresh.
you watched Mandy last night.
I did, and Manchester by the Sea.
A lot of Mandy. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Have you seen Mandy?
no, I read up on it because I knew
It's
you wanted to talk
crazy.
about it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's crazy.
yeah, it seems kind of like a horror. Horror. Is there any comedy element to it? Because I'm
For
just
sure.
okay.
For
I was
sure.
reading the
Yeah.
synopsis and I just wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, it has Nicolas Cage in it, so if Nicolas Cage isn't doing like a little bit of comedy because he's like a ridiculous person, then it doesn't seem fun. Like he's just so over the top. And you know I love Nick Cage.
Yeah. Tell me about where that. Tell me about where that came from. Because I mean, for a lot of people, Nicolas Cage is kind of like
Ridiculous.
out there, completely ridiculous. So what is it about him that you love so much?
I think that I started to watch, I think, you know, I sort of knew about him from National Treasure and from Raising Arizona, and I liked him. And Leaving Las Vegas, even that's what a lot of people say. Like, that's what they use to say, like, he's a good actor. See, he did Leaving Las Vegas, won an Oscar. I'm actually not that big a fan of Leaving Las Vegas.
Right.
It's good, but it's just not the movie that makes me love Nicolas Cage. I think probably his best role is adaptation. Um, if I was to think about it, that's also a movie that's had an impact on me. But
Like his
um,
best, like you would say, his best acting, or
yeah,
his, like pure acting is an adaptation.
yes, I think so. I think that's the where you can be like, oh yeah, he's a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
And then I really love, and it's an odd choice as well, Bad Lieutenant Protocol New Orleans, purely because it's him taking on a Werner Herzog movie, kind of
Yeah.
like
He's one
taking
of
the
your favorite
place of
directors.
Klaus Kinski a little bit.
Yeah.
And what else? I don't know. I think I just like, oh yeah, and Wild at Heart by David Lynch. It's pretty fantastic. Um, and you know his action movies are fun. I think that he's kind of like one of those actors that goes over the top, but is kind of self-aware that he's going over the top. Maybe sort of like Arnold Schwarzenegger is kind of comparable.
Right.
Um, but I think he uses it in a really interesting way as a film actor. Like I don't think he's a Daniel Day-Lewis or Philip Seymour Hoffman, whereas these, you know, these people that totally embody the character. It's more like he's being a film performer, kind of like a silent actor a little bit.
Mhm.
Um yeah, I don't know. And I just think he's funny also. Like it seems like he's having a good time, like he's enjoying himself whenever you watch
Nice.
his
Yeah, and that's
movies.
always important. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And with Mandy, I was watching it again and I hadn't seen it in a while, and it's a bonkers horror flick.
Yeah, it
It's like a
seems pretty wild.
it's a bonkers horror action flick. And if you want to see Nicolas Cage having a chainsaw sword fight, that's where you go. That's your movie. Also, it's very like it has some very heavy themes for like what the movie is. Like it's about like death and loss. It's really metal. I mean, death is like the big theme in it,
Mm.
and so it's almost like it kind of made me appreciate this one Russian director, Tarkovsky, who I think I like maybe two of his movies. All the rest are just way too long. But when I saw that, it kind of made me realize why Tarkovsky is important, because it was almost like a um, Tarkovsky meets Rambo or something like
I love
just
that.
crazy, like 80s pulp action flick.
Yeah.
But it's really worth watching. But I mean, it's a challenging watch because it really kind of dives into like um, toxic masculinity a lot,
Mm.
and I think that also picking Mandy, I kind of just picked it because I think it's a underrated choice. And this past decade has had some really fantastic horror films.
Yes, it has.
Like, yeah, like the 80s had great sci-fi. I wasn't alive then, but it had great sci-fi. I think the 2010s had great horror films.
Dude, I don't know. I'm reading the synopsis, and to me, it sounds like Easy Rider meets Children of the Corn.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, there's a lot of like acid and him doing psychedelics. It's very like psychedelic movie, um, for sure. And it's also got like there's a lot of horror movie references to Hellraiser, other things. I did my English English major senior seminar on horror, the horror genre and literature and fiction, and yeah, it definitely falls into the category of a horror film.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that with a lot of horror films, at least before 2010, oftentimes horror films are kind of seen as like B movie things, but I think they can have some very real subject matters and themes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just kind of being oversaturated with horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
You can make them for cheap. You can, and you hear about your January horror movie releases that get a 20% Rotten Tomatoes score,
Mm-hmm.
and you see them, and then you never see it again. Movies
Yeah,
like
there's a ton of
Beehivee and stuff
those.
like that. But sometimes when you find really good horror, it definitely sticks, and it can last for years and years. Like one of my favorites, The Shining.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and not to mention all the movies from the 2010s as well. There's Get Out, um, La, The Lighthouse,
The
The Witch,
Lighthouse. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Hereditary, Midsummer. I mean, those are heavy horror flicks. I mean, they are horror, like a horror genre, but they have some very big themes that they're taking on.
Yeah, I think we're really getting some pretty spectacular horror filmmakers out there, like Ari Aster, Jordan Peele.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
Robert Eggers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen The Witch, but I've seen The Lighthouse,
Yeah,
and it is
it's a good time.
it's wild. It's everything I want. I think the only thing that could make The Lighthouse better is if for a second they threw in Nicolas Cage with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, that'll be wild. He was like a sailor or a shipboat captain who just comes by the lighthouse. This lighthouse is very spooky. So yeah, so The Shining is one of your movies. Do you want to talk about that as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things I really like about The Shining is, I mean, everybody knows The Shining, everybody's seen The
Yeah.
Shining, but I think that one of my favorite things about is the way different people choose to analyze it, and
Hmm.
there's a really cool
There's a
documentary.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of conspiracy
yeah,
theories.
a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of themes that may or may not be there. And there's a
Right.
really good documentary about it called Room 237, where
Yeah, it's about the moon landing being faked and
yeah,
right.
yeah, like if like basically people are saying, between Danny Torrance's little Apollo 11 hoodie and the
Hmm.
way that the room numbers are written on the room keys in the movie, that he's admitting that he filmed the moon landing back in 1969 for NASA.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Sounds like bullcrap to me.
no, I strongly believe we went to the moon in 1969. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So why The Shining? Because I don't know if it's my favorite Kubrick movie, but I like it a lot. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a few reasons. I think a lot of times when I watch a movie, I like to kind of bring it back down to the very individual relationships and family dynamics,
Hmm.
which I'll talk about in another one of my movies.
Yeah.
But it, like, unlike Spartacus or Doctor Strangelove or any of his other great movies, I love Stanley Kubrick. I love all of his movies, but like, it ultimately comes down to a story about this family and their relationships, and it's absolutely crazy. Like, there's
Mhm.
just everything going on, and horror really probably is my favorite movie genre.
Yeah.
So when it when you kind of get that element in a horror movie with terrific camera work, terrific score,
Hmm.
phenomenal acting,
Yeah.
probably the best acting I've seen in a horror movie,
Hmm.
you get something that sticks.
Yeah. It's certainly one of the most epic horror films ever made. I mean, that partially has to do with it being filmed by Stanley Kubrick, who took every single thing, any kind of genre that he was working in, and just elevated it. Um, or kind of made fun of it a little bit with like Doctor Strangelove. And I love the cinematography, and the sound design is crazy. The music is terrifying. That's probably the most terrifying aspect of it, is the music and Jack
Yeah, the music's
Nicholson's
incredibly on it.
performance.
Yeah, and when we talk about performance, it's not just Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, Shelley
It's
Duvall.
Shelley Duvall and the child actor Danny Lloyd. That's the
Yeah. What's his
one of
name?
the best. His name's Danny Lloyd.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
uh,
And is it Carruthers? What's the guy's name?
Scatman Crothers.
Kevin Crothers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. He's great in it too.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny that have you read the book?
I'm actually in the process of reading the book right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
It's different.
yeah. I think one of the interesting things in the book so far is that Jack in the book is a lot more human. Like
Definitely.
pretty much from the get go in the movie, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
there's
Like
there's
something's
something off
up.
about him.
Something's up with Jack Nicholson in this movie.
when they when they're driving up to the
Yeah, he just mentions cannibalism and
yeah,
he's like, the Donner Party
doc.
out here. They cannibalized each other. It's like,
Yeah.
oh. Yeah, there's Well, in The Shining, the book, I have a friend who really loves Stephen King and he likes the book better. But I totally prefer the movie. Just because I don't know, like it seems more like a Kubrick movie. It seems more experimental. Um, it seems like more unhinged than the book. The book kind of like explains itself and is like he's this way because of his alcoholism. He's
Right.
this way because of this, that. But I think it's almost scarier that Jack Nicholson is kind of like inexplicable. He's just like, I mean, the alcoholism is there, but he's also just like, you know, a maniac.
Yeah, and by the end, it's like his relationship to the hotel and whether it's his environment impacting him or him impacting his environment is kind of all open to interpretation, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's no real there's a lot of horror movies and thrillers that kind of explain themselves. Like, think for example, like an M Night Shyamalan, where you get this twist ending. But there's a lot like kind of unexplained in The Shining, um, which is kind of I think it's kind of refreshing. It doesn't really mm, I don't know. It doesn't really like simplify itself, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll go
Yeah.
kind of back to what I was saying in our Christopher Nolan podcast a few weeks ago. Is I what I really like is when a director, you know, trusts their audience
Yeah.
and kind of allows them a little bit of interpretation. Um,
Yeah. And that's certainly a Kubrick thing, especially with 2001, A Space Odyssey.
oh
Because
yeah,
that movie is like you just have to go with it. Go
yeah,
with the flow.
yeah. 2001 is kind of more of like a I obviously it is a movie, but I don't really think of it as a movie. I think of it kind of like as an experience. I'm just
Hmm.
going in and
Definitely.
experiencing 2001.
There's this awesome book I read about the making of 2001. And it's about the relationship between Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. And Kubrick, like, for as good as he was, I think he couldn't really write. So he always employed like the best writers of his time, which was like Arthur C. Clarke, Nabokov, or Lolita, who wrote the screenplay. Um, uh, this one pulp writer who wrote The Killing, I think, and then Stephen King for The Shining.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about how many adaptations Stanley Kubrick did. Because
So many,
yeah,
literally
it's crazy.
everything.
Like a Clockwork Orange, yeah, 2001, Shining. It
Hmm.
because Lolita. Um,
Doctor Strangelove, for the most part, it's kind of like making fun of this one book that he was going to do.
okay,
It's just like
yeah,
a joke on this book that was, I think, scary, but it was just to him, it was completely ridiculous.
mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you got to give credit to Kubrick for that because I don't even though I'm actively reading the book The Shining right now, or I've actively read A Clockwork Orange in the past,
Hmm.
like I don't think of his movie adaptations as adaptations. I think of them as, you know, their own standalone thing that
Yeah.
is terrific. It's
They become a Kubrick movies in a
yeah,
way.
yep,
And you and I are both fans of Eyes Wide Shut, which I
yep.
think is based on a short story.
I
But
think you're right. I think it is.
yeah,
Yeah,
and Barry Lyndon, I love. It's a long one though.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess comparing it to Mandy, they're definitely very different. Um, but yeah, I don't know. They're both just crazy horror films. And Mandy, it doesn't really explain, like I was watching it again and it doesn't really explain like I guess the movie takes place in the mind of Mandy, but it's kind of like left open-ended. Uh it's sort of like, you know, does The Shining kind of take place all in Shelley Duvall's head or Jack Nicholson's head? Um, yeah, there's a lot of room for interpretation. Also,
Right.
I think side note, I think the best performance in The Shining is from Shelley Duvall.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that poor woman.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's yeah, she's losing her mind in that movie.
absolutely.
Yeah.
She's great.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
you want to talk about lead that into Mandy by the Sea?
Yeah, let's do that. Um,
Wow. Yeah. It has a, I would be interested. You told me one time that there was something that related to Kubrick in Manchester by the Sea, and I'm curious. Maybe you could explain that for me.
well, I would love to explain that for you.
If you don't remember, that's fine. But maybe you had some epiphany, and then it was like,
Yeah, I I should have kept a journal,
yeah,
but
that's all good. Well, I'll tell you, I rewatched it, and there were definitely more things that I noticed watching it the second time. Because
wait, are you saying this is only the second time you've seen Man?
I understand you had a period of time when you were watching it every day.
I was hoping
um,
for something.
yeah, understandable. Sometimes we have those movies we go to, like Mandy.
Yeah.
I don't think I've watched Mandy more than 3 times though, but yeah. But Manchester by the Sea, nothing can prepare you. I should say nothing can prepare you for what happens halfway through the movie. Um, it's really shocking and uh, tragic,
Oh my
and
goodness, yeah, it's
yeah.
so emotionally draining.
Hmm. And there are also parts of it that are really funny at the same time, and I think it's really good. It's kind of like it doesn't really have a genre. It's kind of just this slice of life drama uh, with this family and this guy who is a wreck and has had this tragic thing happen in his life. Um, and it's kind of like a portrait of Massachusetts, and um, yeah, there's a lot. And it's definitely was one of the best movies of the past decade.
Right. Yeah. I think what I really like about it is, it's just kind of this picture of Lee Chandler's life. It's not, it doesn't give you the closure that you necessarily always want in a movie because
Mm-hmm.
life doesn't give you closure all the time.
No,
So, and
sometimes
and
never.
exactly. So sometimes, there are things in your past that, tragedies that you're not going to overcome. And I think it was really uh, beautiful that the movie showed that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the hands of another writer or filmmaker, it would have become really sappy, and maybe there would have been a happy ending for that character. Like maybe he would, uh, cure his trauma and go through some therapy, and but yeah, with what happens, it's not something that you can overcome, and it kind of also has to do with the society of the town, Manchester by the Sea, and how they all kind of can't get over him either. Like they can't really accept him into their culture.
Right. Yeah. And
Like all those bar fight scenes.
yeah, the bar fights. Yeah, those in Boston. And I think it's also showing that he doesn't really want to be accepted into that culture anymore. He
No,
he 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 wants, I don't know if he wants to be alone, but
seems like it.
it's like he's definitely feeling a really profound sense of guilt. And
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a
And
lot of guilt and shame um, that he has for sure.
yeah, and I don't know if he thinks he deserves to be embraced by his community.
Yeah, like that scene. I mean, another amazing actor, Michelle Williams. That scene where they meet up is crazy.
Yeah,
Like, not only the amount of emotion in that scene, but also like the restraint and also the performance of those two actors is crazy.
yeah. The performances in this movie, I mean,
All
even
good. All of them are good.
some of the best I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Uh, like I I don't think, and I think kind of like going back to The Shining, you know, those performances were great in a absolutely over the top way.
For sure.
Yeah,
A lot of Kubrick movies are. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And then these performances were so subtle, so
Stick.
subdued, and like I could watch the interactions between those characters again and again and again, and obviously I have, but
Hmm. The
yeah.
body language for Casey Affleck
Hmm.
is incredible. I mean, I think it says a lot. And I think somebody who's really amazing at that is like Robert De Niro, and Daniel Day Lewis for sure is just the way that a character carries themselves, and he just, yeah, really amazing how he moves,
Right.
like the hospital scene at the beginning.
Yeah, just really kind of, it's like he's really like isolating himself in,
Yeah.
even in the way he carries his body, you know.
Hmm. Yeah,
The
it's a
way,
bit passive aggressive maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
than a little.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's some really great scenes. There's I like the scene with them with his nephew practicing with the band in the basement. That just
Yep.
kind of took me back
Yeah, me
to
too.
high school, and just hanging out with all our band friends,
Yep.
rock band friends, and then also the scene with Matthew Broderick.
I was
Pretty
just about to
amazing.
bring that up, that great little Matthew Broderick cameo.
Yeah, there's another movie. I just like Matthew Broderick as like a creepy 40-year-old man. Like, it's pretty amazing. Or like, middle-aged man, like an election and this. He's not, Ferris Bueller or anything.
Yeah, Matthew Broderick's funny.
Yeah.
I, I enjoy watching him pop up in things.
Have you seen You Can Count on Me?
No, I haven't.
So it's Kenneth Lonergan's. It might be his first movie. I guess he was a playwright, but you should really check it out because it's kind of like a cheaper version of Manchester by the Sea. Not to say that Manchester by the Sea is like an expensive film, but I mean it has more scope, I think, than You Can Count on Me.
Mm.
And it kind of deals with the same stuff. And Matthew Broderick is a creepy boss in it. So hi Kitty.
Yeah, interesting. I'll make note of that.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like Manchester by the Sea, it really also kind of motivated me to watch a movie that I love now, which is also one of my favorite movies of the 2010s, called Marriage Story, which is a
Yeah.
Netflix movie by Noah Baumbach.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody out there likes Manchester by the Sea, but they do want something a little bit happier at the end,
Yeah.
they should check out Marriage Story, because Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams were amazing in Manchester by the Sea. Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver were also just divine in Marriage
Yeah.
Story. So
Definitely. Yeah, those are both like slice of life movies that I really love. And even for Noah Baumbach, I guess that's kind of a happier ending because a lot of his movies are kind of like that, or about divorce and family separating. The Squid and the Whale certainly is also a
Yep.
really good one.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and also I would say Lady Bird also is another fantastic one by Greta Gerwig. That's like a slice of life movie.
I love Lady Bird.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
definitely less sad than
Mhm.
Manchester by the Sea.
Yeah. Lucas Hedges shows up in that one too.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. He's a talented actor.
Very talented actor.
What
Yeah.
other movies do we have? I made a big list of movies that have defined my life, but yeah. Another one. Oh, so another one from the past decade that I feel like is somewhat underrated, but I think a lot of people watched it was Mad Max.
Fury Road.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people did watch. Did you say it was underrated?
a little bit. Well, yeah, I don't. Maybe it's not underrated, but it's pretty well rated, I think.
Yeah. I think it's really highly regarded as one of
Mm.
the best action movies of this decade. I mean, and it's kind of crazy that it actually, I think in 2015 or 2016 when it came out, it won the most Academy Awards of any movie that year.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
One like probably like best editing, best
yeah, it won a lot of
cinematography,
the edit
stuff like
stuff,
that,
but
sound design.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's a really well put together action film, and I guess it took them like a really long time to get it made. Um, but yeah, it's pretty amazing,
yeah,
amazing movie.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so good. So what other movies do you want
Well,
to talk about, John?
let's segue into another of the great action movies of the 2010s. One of our combined favorites, if you will.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think this one is actually underrated, to be honest. To be very, very, very honest. Um, let's talk London Has Fallen,
Okay, let's do it.
because there's a lot. We went to go see it, and I think it was a pretty good experience in the movie theater for both of us, and I think for a lot of people. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a movie that has had it had terrible critical reviews. It's definitely not, it's not Manchester by the Sea. It's not even Mandy. It's something else. It's a bit unusual, but it's still a kind of a bromance action film.
Right, right. It kind of reminds me of Point Break. Um,
Yes.
yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship between President Asher and Secret Service agent Mike Banning
Mm-hmm.
reminds me very much of the relationship between Bodie and Johnny Utah.
For sure. That's definitely a classic action film. Um, yeah. So I guess the reason I really love London Has Fallen, not to mention to how goofy it is, but I think like we were laughing pretty hard in the theater, and I think a lot of people were in general because it's such a ridiculous movie. It's almost a satire of our present news cycle, at least
Yeah,
before the Trump presidency.
yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fair observation. I mean, it's it's like one of those things. I think I may have said this before, where like the movie is so bombastic and goofy and in a good way,
Mm-hmm.
but like if anything like this happened in the real world,
It'd be
uh,
awful.
it would be a global tragedy. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think ultimately what this movie comes down to for me is just the relationship between Banning and Asher. And
Yeah,
have you seen either of the other two in the series, either Olympus Has Fallen or Angel Has
I've
Fallen?
seen I've seen both, and I do like. I think Olympus Has Fallen is a little shaky for me. But I thought the third one kind of like took from what London Has Fallen did, and I think it was pretty good, but I don't think it was as good as the wackiness of London Has Fallen.
Yeah.
It almost feels like you're watching somebody play a video game of a of a terrifying potential terrorist attack, basically.
It's um yeah, and do you think London Has Fallen is the peak of Gerard Butler's action career?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know because I'm not really that big of a Gerard Butler fan. I mean, 300 is okay. Um, I'm blanking on his other movies, but he seems like almost in the vein of Arnold Schwarzenegger or Nicolas Cage, where he's just this ridiculous action star. But I think so. I don't know if um they went into making this movie like thinking this is going to be Gerard Butler's shining moment. Um, but it's definitely my favorite.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
my favorite too. Um,
There are a lot of great lines.
yeah.
Um, like when Gerard Butler shoots this guy in the face, he goes, fuck you. And um, I don't know. There's like scenes where they're alone in London. It looks like they're on a green screen, and Aaron Eckhart is like, "These guys are everywhere," and it's just wild, just goofy
Yeah, I
fun
think President Asher will always be my president.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and he'll also be our district attorney. Is that what Harvey Dent is?
Yeah, he's
District attorney. Yeah,
yeah. Aaron Eckhart is some of my favorite some of my favorite elected officials.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of underrated in The Dark Knight. I mean, obviously he's shadowed by Heath Ledger. Um, but
What is
yeah,
what has Aaron Eckhart been up to lately?
I don't know. He was in some like vampire movie a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
But he was
Not
in
sure.
Sully. He was the co-pilot in
That's
Sully.
right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I do think Angel Has Fallen was missing his presence though. I know it's kind of Gerard Butler's series, but I think Angel Has Fallen was missing his presence.
it's true. Morgan Freeman was pretty good. But the chemistry between Aaron Eckhart and Gerard Butler is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Underrated flick for sure.
Yep.
I think I think people will look at it in 50 years and they'll realize what they missed.
I think so too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, so what other movies have you on your list, John?
More movies on my list. Well, so kind of going back to that idea that sometimes we want something really good, a character study about an individual and
Mm-hmm.
their struggles and a slice of life, or sometimes we want something that is just completely bombastic and over the top.
Linda's Fall.
Yep. I think one of my favorite movie series and something that has changed over time and kind of presents both of those things to us is the Rocky movie series.
For sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes with Sylvester Stallone as big as he is now, I think sometimes people forget that the first Rocky is actually a really good movie and like a really
Yeah.
good character study of this guy trying to figure out his own self-worth and and experience hardship and try to overcome that and it's amazing. And then by the time you get to the end of the series, or not counting the Creed films, but the end of the original Rocky series, it's
Yeah.
just
Craziness.
ending the Cold War, um, inspiring geopolitical change. It's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I recently watched Rocky 4 maybe a few years ago, and yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's up there with London Has Fallen as like almost like propaganda, you know. It's this insane um story. And yeah, but Rocky 1 is probably like on par with even something like Manchester by the Sea. It's very realistic, and it's mainly about this guy and his relationship to this woman, and him trying to overcome his circumstances and
Yeah.
his place in life. And I mean, both Manchester by the Sea and Rocky could be Bruce Springsteen songs, you know.
Yeah, they could. That's a great metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of shows that, the people in your life, they're not necessarily always perfect people.
Mm-mm.
Rocky's best friend Polly is
Scumbag.
he's he's a terrible person, but
Yeah.
he's one of the people that's kind of by Rocky's side. And Mickey at the beginning, he was ready to get rid of Rocky because he thought Rocky was a bum. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe the actual nicest character in the movie besides Rocky himself is the loan shark. It's
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would
it's
need to watch it again. I haven't seen it in a while. But I remember it being like really surprising. Like it doesn't really have a happy ending, but it kind of does.
yeah,
Um,
it's got like the
it's a bittersweet ending, I
it
think.
is kind of bittersweet. I mean, I think actually I'm not so sure I agree with that because
Yeah.
he he and this movie came out in 1976, so I'm not going to spoil it. So like Rocky doesn't win the fight at the end against Apollo Creed, but
Yeah.
there's a split decision, and he goes the distance with Apollo Creed. He goes all 15 rounds without being knocked out.
Right.
So he met his goal at the end of the movie,
That's true.
and more importantly, he established his relationship with Adrian. So I mean, I think while the movie is very much, kind of a a little bit of a gritty character study, 1970s character study,
Mm-hmm.
I think the ending of the movie kind of almost segued in a new kind of the new big budget movies that we see that get like, you know, the happy endings and the
For
character.
sure. Rocky 4.
Yeah. So
Yeah. That's true. And I was thinking about that with Manchester by the Sea, is that these movies are very both Rocky and Manchester by the Sea are very unsentimental, but they have kind of a happy ending because they're realistic, and just the fact that they're, you know, um being realistic with these people's lives is kind of hopeful a little bit, because we're not all like living a life like London Has Fallen or Rocky 4, although we may want to like escape with those. um but yeah, I think the ending, it is a happy ending in Rocky and in Manchester by the Sea, because you know although they can't like um exceed their present circumstances, they do kind of reach their goals and succeed in a way.
yeah, I mean, I think at the ending of Manchester by the Sea, a lot of people were hoping that Casey Affleck would agree to adopt Lucas Hedges, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't
And
think
stay, yeah.
I don't think he's quite there yet. But he does in fact build that relationship, build someone that he's close to in life again, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of shown with them passing the ball together at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or are they fishing?
they're So
Oh, they
it's
do pass the ball,
yeah,
and then
it's,
they're fishing.
it's
Yeah.
them at their regular age passing the ball,
Mhm.
and then the flashbacks are the fishing with them and his father who had passed away.
I guess it's kind of hopeful because it's like these portraits of people who, you know, yeah, Casey Affleck works as a handyman, and Rocky is, I can't remember what Rocky does, but he does some
He's
kind of
a
shady stuff.
Yeah, he works for a loan shark, but he won't break people's thumbs because it'll stop them from going to work, and then he can't
Right.
repay the loans. Yeah,
He's got a heart of gold.
yeah.
I heard that apparently Sylvester Stallone, because he wrote the screenplay, apparently wrote it as a guy who's trying to become an actor, and then he switched it to becoming a boxer.
Oh wow,
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't know that. I knew that he had wrote the movie, and I knew that he he absolutely wanted to be the star of the movie. Like when he was selling the script to studios, he it was a big deal that he be the main character.
And that's pretty amazing. Like that's different than, I guess him and Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of get compared because they're um have this different way of talking, I guess, and they have a lot of similar action films, but it's kind of unique that he wrote his own script, and it's a good script.
Yeah, great script.
Yeah.
Actually. But it's not as dialogue heavy as a movie like Manchester by the Sea, but it tells its story kind of just through the actions and through the environment of the character. So
Mm.
it's pretty cool.
I guess that could be a good segue, or I could figure out how to segue that into what do you want to talk about? Something Wild or Spirit of the Beehive?
Let's talk Spirit of the Beehive because
Okay.
I wanna learn more about. I read up on it and I know it it took place in Spain, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a Spanish movie, so I want to know about how what that means to you and why that's important to you.
Yeah, I think it didn't. I didn't really. It's another movie that I think I really liked, but I don't know if I got it the first time I watched it. It's very much in the vein of like artsy Terrence Malick or um, mm, yeah, or like a Werner Herzog kind of movie. But it's interesting. It's about this this girl growing up in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, who goes to this movie, Frankenstein, and sees it, and it kind of like traumatizes her and changes her life in a way. She becomes more aware of her world around her a little bit. This is kind of me explaining it, but the movie doesn't really explain this because it's a lot of stuff where you'll see the camera following the mother, you'll see the camera following the father, and it kind of like has this sense of mystery going on. And none of the characters talk about the Spanish Civil War that's kind of ending around that time.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a small town. Um, and the first time I watched it, I thought it was really beautiful. And I thought it was really good. But now when I watch it, since I lived there for a year, it just takes me back to España and the small town where I worked in, which I guess the small town where they shot it is uh, pretty close, uh, maybe about an hour's drive north of where I was. If you go over um, Sierra Legreros, yeah, it's very beautiful and it's very poetic. And I don't know, I guess it kind of reminds me also of my own childhood, and probably a lot of people's childhoods are like this, where things are, you know, more imaginative when you're a child and you don't necessarily know what's going on in the bigger world. Um, but there's certainly things going on. And I had a very traumatic experience in a movie theater when I was very young. Um, I saw a trailer for Scream 3, which I actually looked up that trailer before this and I found it. And yeah, that like just sent me, I feel like kind of made me more aware of movies somehow in a way.
Really,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that's interesting. So one of the things in Spirit of the Beehive is there's definitely a lot of symbolism,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's been. And do you think kind of the region of Spain that the movie takes place in and stuff? Like if I came out there and visited you for a while, it's a very
Very dry, very
very
arid.
dry, very very isolated, like the town of Navamoral, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
you know it's a very small town surrounded by a lot of just open area.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think kind of like the locale where that movie was set like represents the isolation and the isolation of war and everything going on at that time?
For sure, for sure, yeah. And there's stuff like little interactions that the main character has, like there's a soldier that pops up and um yeah, it definitely creates this isolation and you're not sure also if the parents like what's their story, like are they on this side or that side? Um yeah, it definitely creates this isolation and that is very yeah you could probably associate with that Spanish landscape of just flat you know arid almost like Texas or Arizona
Right.
type landscape.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is the movie told through the eyes of the child? Is it told through from Anna's perspective?
More or less. So like the first 10 minutes are without dialogue and are just this weird like music that's playing that's kind of spooky. um yeah, and but eventually it goes into her perspective. But it switches around from the different parents to her sister sometimes. um but yeah, but also the color palette is all like gold and like a beehive, like yeah, also like who knows what Spirit of the Beehive means, like it's just a cool title, you know.
Right.
Yeah, they never
You,
explain
you
it.
have a poster. You really love this movie. You have a
I
poster
do.
in your house, don't you?
Yeah, it's dope. Oh, I have several movie posters. I have The Third Man, Spirit of the Beehive. I have Dawn of the Dead over my books. And I have The Great Silence, which is like a spaghetti western thing. So I'm a nerd.
You like movies or something?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Yeah. Um, but yeah, there's also The Third Man, which we could talk about.
Yeah, and you have always loved the Third Man.
Yes.
Going back to high school, I remember you loving this movie.
Yeah, even before high school. I mean, it's up there like that and The Great Escape, I think are pretty foundational movies in that way.
Uh-huh.
Um, but The Third Man, yeah, it was something a movie that immediately like affected me and I was like, "Oh, like that's a good movie."
Mhm.
Yeah.
What is it about the movie? Is it just the noir aesthetic? Is it the
Yeah,
performances? Is it Joseph Cotton and Orson Welles? Is it the speech?
I think it's just for me and actually I after we did our Coen Brothers episode, I found out the Coen Brothers watch it every time they go to make a movie. They watch that and I forget. I think they had a few other movies. But I think it's a perfect movie for me. I think every single aspect of it um that you could think of like cuz we were focusing a lot on directors and I don't think all movies are auteur movies, they're not like made by a central director who has this vision and blah blah blah. Like sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. And I think The Third Man, it just has so many good people in it. Like you have the director Carol Reed, who's at his best. He's I don't think he's always been a great director, but he's just on point in that movie.
Mhm.
And then you've got Joseph Cotton and Orson Welles, who have this incredible chemistry from knowing each other. Um, Joseph Cotton, also from Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, wow, I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah, and the cinematography is crazy. I mean, even now you watch it and it still holds up. Like for, and I think it was
Yeah,
one of the
it
first.
does. That's true.
Yeah, it's one of the first movies that I watched that was black and white that I was like, oh, that's not boring. That was
Yeah.
really good. And the editing is really on point, and it's written by Graham Greene, and the soundtrack is done by a guy who played the zither in a bar in Vienna. So, I mean, it's what's to what's to
What's
not
it not like?
what's to not like? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty on point.
Yeah. Agreed.
And
Yeah,
another movie,
that one, and I'm glad you did.
yeah, and another movie. It's not a movie I watched in the 2010s that got to me, The Third Man, but it's definitely one of my favorites. It has a relationship also with The Departed.
Oh, how so?
There's a ton of stuff from The Departed that's in The Third Man. There's like this weird narration that never happens again at the beginning of The Departed, where Jack Nicholson is like explaining Boston to you,
Yep.
Boston in the 70s. And then towards the end, there's this funeral scene where um, the love interest like avoids Matt Damon. Um, there's a lot of tilted angles.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that Warren Beatty was also a Richmonder?
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah. Warren Beatty's cool.
I like Warren Beatty a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think for me the first black and white movie that I really saw that I loved was The Apartment. But
oh yeah, that's a great movie.
random side note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a long time, but yeah, Jack Lemmon is fantastic.
Yeah.
Have you seen Some Like It Hot?
Yes, I have.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So is there any like of your favorite movies that we haven't mentioned yet?
So I made a list of about 42 ones. So I think that there are a lot. I do think
Oh
that
yeah, me
you
too.
know, I think that the conversation today was kind of about the movies that really stuck. You know, regardless of where you're at in life, like they're movies that are still impacting you.
Yeah,
So I think that we touched on some good bases today.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that concludes this episode of Movie Mood.
All right. Well,
Any final thoughts, John?
yeah. Go see movies. With a
If
lot
you
of theaters,
can safely,
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
social distancing.
With a lot of theaters being closed and stuff like that, movies, older movies are really accessible through streaming services right now,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, check them out. Check out things that you like. Check out things that are like what you like, and then check out things that are new to you because that's how you learn more about yourself. And yeah, enjoy your day.
Yeah, and watch what you enjoy. Don't waste
Yeah,
time with any of this other stuff.
yeah, true, true.
And that concludes our episode of Movie Mood. We'll see you later on Movie Mood. All right.